Hey guys, this is Nathan Merrill with Vision Stone and Tile, and this is the Builder Sessions podcast.
Welcome to the Builder Sessions, a podcast where we chat with your favorite builders.
We get to know them, their stories, and hopefully inspire you to get off the couch and build something cool. I'm Hoff.
And I'm Rosie.
And on this episode, we chat with Nathan Merrill from Vision Stone and Tile. We chat about what he's learned in the 17 years in the trade, his pillars to personal wellness, the artistry involved in the installation, and some of the most memorable builds he's been a part of.
Please enjoy our interview with Nathan. Nathan, welcome to the Builder Sessions.
Howdy. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's awesome to have you. We big fans of your Instagram account and the artistry behind all that, and we're going to definitely get into that. But first question for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
So my name is Nathan. My last name is Merrill, like Merrill Lynch, but unfortunately I didn't go into that line of work. I chose to work with my hands. So I'm a tile installer. I'm second generation. I am 34 years old and I've been doing it for 17 years. So
Wow.
half my life has been in this trade. It's my dad, longer than 17 actually, because he was putting tools in my hands when I was 10. I don't know. I have a picture from a birthday party when I was like 6, and it was a full-on toolbox, not full of like plastic tools, but like real tools.
Yeah.
So, second generation tile guy, just out here tiling away.
Tiling away.
Yeah, tiling away, one shower at a time.
Oh, that's
So you
awesome.
pretty much lived and breathed tile work since, like this
Yeah,
is what
yeah.
you do.
To be more precise, silica dust.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of that has been breathed in. But yeah, this is so I left home when I was 19 and went to Florida. The only other job I've had was for like 2 months. This was in 2008 when the economy was just destroyed essentially. So most of the work had dried up. So I went and mowed yards for
Hmm.
like 2 months, and that was miserable. Thankfully, shortly after that, a previous employer of mine called me back, and I was back on the tools. So started down there. Well, started in Ohio, where I'm from, and then moved to Florida. And let's see, from there, I worked for a company for a few years, and then eventually just went out on my own. So I think I was 22 when I was over the whole boss employee relationship and just went and started finding my own work wherever I could. So, and that's been 22, however many years ago that. Been on my own ever since then.
So showers, flooring, like what can I give our listeners
Yeah, I guess.
what kind of scope of projects do you do and have you been involved with?
So, currently I'm a one-man band, but that's very deliberate and that's very much by choice. I lived in Wyoming for 10 years, and I have 3 kids. They were all born there, all home births. My wife is, shout out to my wife, who is like stronger than me because she did all that natural at the house. Like,
Wow.
I don't, honestly, I don't even know how we got started down that path, but we were just really intrigued by that whole, I don't even know what you would call that, home births with doulas and midwives and all that stuff. And she really wanted to do that. I didn't, it was all her idea. So when I was there, I had a tile store where I had a retail showroom, and I had crews that I ran installing tile. Uh, but it really, at the end of the day, it was just all too much for me. I didn't really get a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment out of that, like I do just installing every day. So now I've scaled all that back, which was it's quite the process if you ever set out deliberately to simplify your life, going from it, a more complicated situation like that. Usually when people go from more complicated situations like that to simpler lives, it's something dramatic or radical happens that kind of strips things away from them. It didn't happen that way for me. I just woke up one day and realized, like, I have way too many irons in the fire. None of this is bringing me really any joy or satisfaction. I'm not that savvy as an entrepreneur, so it's not like I was, keeping all this extra money from having crews and all that stuff. So I thought, we're just going to shut all this down, and I want to concentrate on the artistry of tile and just work by myself. And so that's where I'm at currently. But yeah, it's tile showers and floors and just custom tile work.
Did you find hard to scale back? Or I guess maybe I need to frame this the other way. Did you find it hard relying on crews to do the work instead of yourself, with the quality control and being so hands-on and wanting to take ownership and control of the projects and having crews? Was that kind of difficult to go through as you kind of navigate through your journey?
Well, I'm a firm believer that each person has to figure out what's going to work for them, right? So I don't know, you guys read a lot of books or some books.
Yeah, some, yeah.
So there's a book that I read, it's been over 10, 12 years ago now, called The E-Myth. And it's a real popular book among entrepreneurs. It's essentially about by a guy named Michael Gerber, about how to systematize and scale and grow business and all that sort of thing. And so I got intrigued by the idea of scale. And if I were to be really honest, probably the numbers side of it. I just thought, bigger is better. This is how we're going to get the nest egg put together and secure some things that at the time I thought were very much worth pursuing. Um, I wouldn't say it wasn't technically a challenge for me. I accomplished what I set out to accomplish. The challenge was on the wellness side of things. I was run ragged, and you're always putting out fires. You're always dealing with issues with employees and yes, quality control, all of that. I don't say any of that to knock a person's decision to go down that route. This is why I say it's important to know yourself. It took me a long time to realize that, and this is going to sound funny, but I'm highly introverted. I'm very private, but I'm also extremely creative and uh, artistic. And what I was doing, it just was like trying to jam the square peg in the round hole. It just was not the fit for the type of life that I really wanted to be living. I just was ignorant of that. I didn't realize that, that they're simpler and healthier. And I don't want to say easier because life is easy for no one, but there were ways I could have gone about things that would have saved me um, lots of grief. But, no regrets there because that's honestly what's required to learn certain things about yourself.
So when you're out now by your well not by your well working solo.
Yeah, yeah, for myself.
Yeah,
Yep,
for
yep.
yourself. Thank you. um, how is it like? Are you just did your customers give you just free game to just be as creative as you want, or do some of them see your stuff on Instagram and like you got to come do this, however much it costs, there it is, or is there a lot of customer input in the designs and that type of thing? How free are you with that kind of thing?
So, I mean, like anything, it's a variety. My intention with all of my projects is the more custom, the better.
Hmm.
The more creative liberty and freedom I get, the better. But these are people's homes that I'm working in,
Yeah.
so it's not. I can't expect people just to give me the keys and let me do literally whatever I want. But the more trust there is in that relationship, which is usually determined you know, by the avenue through which they find me, usually the more liberty they give me to do something creative or custom, or at least have input in the design process and all of that. So anymore, it's almost everything is word of mouth or through Instagram. Um, Almost all of my best projects have come one way or another through Instagram. So that's been a really good tool for me, and it's been great because I didn't start my Instagram with any intention of it. It was really just a creative outlet, right? It was just a place to make fun and goofy videos and post them somewhere for other people to see. And that actually started like way back when I had employees and all that stuff. So maybe that was just a plea, an internalized thing coming out that just needed to be satisfied, right? And I just kept up with it over the years. And so it's just grown, and turns out that it's a phenomenal way to have um, a lot of liberty on projects. It's a great way to build a relationship of trust with clientele. They find you through that, through those channels, and there's just so much trust in that relationship going into it, because if you put out stuff like I put it out, a person can really get to know who this person is just through, the abundance of content that's there. They can just, watch all this content and
Mhm.
hear and look at the things that I say. And so by the time they call me, they know almost exactly what it is they're getting. In fact, that's what they want. And so I don't most of the time have to really go out of my way to sell myself or to do tons of marketing or any of that stuff. I just put the work out there, and I've found that to be the most satisfying way to go about things. I just do what I want and put it out there. And if I can get it in front of enough eyeballs, a certain percentage of those people will reach out and let me do something cool for them.
Mhm. It almost like weeds out the type of, I don't want to say this, like I don't mean for this to sound bad, but it almost weeds out the type of customers that you, or the type of clientele that you don't want to work with
Right.
in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very much a filter for me
Yeah.
because I have a very like specific idea of, and it's not all about me, but you know, I've done all the types of work, right? I've done the fill-in stuff that's just cheap and pays next to nothing just to keep my guys busy, all the way up to working I think at this point, I've worked on 5 projects for billionaires. And I worked when I was in Cody, Wyoming. I worked on Kanye West's ranch when he was still there. It was a very short stint that he was there, but I got to work on some of his properties there. Um, and however that all turned out, it was before I had to sign this non-disclosure agreement. So I guess I can say that and talk about it. Um, but what was I saying? Oh, I was saying that I have a very specific type of client that I'm looking for. And that type of client is usually looking for what I offer. And so it me just putting all this stuff out there, it just cuts through all that noise, right? People know I'm if you just have like a 20 square foot little tile repair or something like that, you're not going to look at the type of work that I'm doing that I put out there and think like, oh, I want to call that guy, right? You're going to call probably a handyman or a local tile guy, and that's fine. I'm not knocking that at all. It's just been a very and um, deliberate and focused effort to work for the type of clientele that I really want to be working for.
Do you think, I'm just wondering, like, because you've been in the game for so long now, well, your whole life, well,
Right.
essentially, professionally half, but I'm just wondering, because we hear all the time about other areas of industry and construction, let's say, like, for instance, the pandemic impacted the price of wood and really, impacted that industry or construction or whatever. I'm just curious, how did the pandemic impact what you do as far as like the prices? Because I've never talked with a tile installer before, and I don't, everyone knows about the price of lumber. Oh, this is crazy. But like, how did the pandemic impact your bottom line and what you do?
So I want to speak very in the most sensitive way possible about the topic because um, we I was in Wyoming, and I don't know if where are you guys located at?
We're
Canada?
in
Canada. Yeah.
Alberta, so
Okay.
similar population, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So 500,000 people in the whole state,
Yeah.
right? And by size, it's like the 10th biggest state in the United States. So it's a massive state with not very many people. Um, it's the cowboy state. And so, as you can imagine, it's a very conservative state, a very, very independent place. When that all happened, my life was so arranged that I feel I almost have survivor's guilt in a sense because it didn't really affect me nor my family at all. All three of my kids, not only did my wife do three home births, she also homeschools them. So they were already, well, my two older ones, they were already in school when all that kind of went down and all the lockdowns and all that stuff was happening. Uh, it didn't really phase us.
Mhm.
And at that was right toward the end of my 10 years in Wyoming. So at that point, it was just me and one helper. The store was closed down. I wasn't doing any type of production work or any of that stuff anymore. So we didn't really feel it. And like I said, I'm trying to be sensitive about the topic because I know a lot of people did feel
Oh,
it
of
in a
course, yeah.
major way.
Mm.
Um, but we didn't, thankfully. And so now where I did feel it was pricing across the board for materials, right? It went up on just across the board. That a lot of that is probably post with all the stuff we're seeing with supply chain issues and inflation and all of that. We have seen stuff go up across the board, but I've tried to aggressively stay ahead of that as much as I can with my own how I price my own projects,
Hmm.
um, and just use as much foresight and planning as possible when it comes to getting all the proper materials for projects. So I don't know. Did I
Yeah,
answer the
Yeah.
question
absolutely.
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like,
Affected, but minimally.
yeah, absolutely.
What about for acquiring product and materials? Was there did that, was there a lag or, longer wait times for that throughout pandemic, considering, other construction materials, everything was kind of affected in its own way, but can you speak on that? And did it affect lining up jobs and getting product to be able to complete jobs?
Minimally.
Hmm.
There were some products. Uh, I don't know. I won't get into all the specifics of it, but there were some issues with certain waterproof backer boards that were difficult to get a hold of. Thin set was not difficult. Um, I don't. As far as the supply chain disruptions, most of the manufacturers that I kept track of, uh, they were impacted, but not like, lumber was majorly impacted, and some other industries were. But I don't know, for whatever reason, the goods required to do my job, for the most part, weren't weren't too severely slowed down or, impacted that much. So I didn't really have too many issues there.
That's
I
good.
worked straight through the whole thing, and
Wow, cool.
yeah, I had
Good for
multiple
you.
projects in a row where it was just me and my guy, and no one else was really around. So it, like I said, we were all just very fortunate. Primarily, that was a function of just being in the state we were in,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
We weren't. Now I'm back in Ohio, and Northeast Ohio, where I'm from, it just like it ravaged this area. It was terrible, and so just being out in the desert, right, in the mountains in the desert, just by virtue of so few people there, um, it just didn't impact us like it did so many other people in more densely populated areas.
Hmm. Now, looking at your work, and you've talked about, the artistry of tiling. Were you artistic growing up? Was this something that you've always had that artistic capability and you've incorporated into tiling, or can you speak a little bit about that?
So, yes, very artistic growing up, but I grew up in a pretty chaotic environment. So I have ADHD that was never properly dealt with, nor handled, nor understood at all. So I have so much energy. I have energy like all day long, all night long. It just never stops. But I was always very frazzled. And so the energy was never directed. I'm an extremely curious person. So I always have my hands dipped into something new or trying to learn something new. I read books like nobody I know, just nonstop, and consume content basically all day, every day. And for the longest time, I thought it was just I viewed it as a positive thing. Like, man, I can do all this stuff, and I just the Energizer Bunny. And eventually, you start to realize, like, I don't think my brain quite is operating optimally. My focus, it's not that I was unfocused, it's just I was always scattered into so many different things. I didn't mention this, but when I went to Wyoming, I went there to pastor a church.
Mm.
And so I went there and actually started the church from scratch, built it up to, um, at our peak, there's 60 or 65 people somewhere in there, which isn't huge. It's not much, but it is a town of 9,500 people we were in Wyoming. So while doing that, I also had a retail store and a tile installation business, three children that were born via home birth. So I'm just one of those guys that always has way too much stuff going on. And so on the creative side of things, there was a side of me that was never nurtured, right,
Hmm.
growing up. My parents were divorced when I was very young, and I went from living with my mom when I was around 7 to living with my dad from about 7 on. And my dad is just like a bachelor's bachelor, right? So we grew up, me, my brother, my dad in one house. Um, there was really no uh, fostering of the creative side of things, the feminine aspect that you would like to have in a home so that your children can be, well-rounded and balanced and be in touch with both their empathetic and creative side, but also their aggressive and structured and disciplined side. I didn't have any of that. And my whole upbringing was really out of whack and out of balance. And I don't say any of that with regret or make this next statement with regret, but so much I think of my just raw creative ability or whatever it may be was not funneled or channeled in any way appropriate. I was absent in school like the entire time. I mean, I clocked out or I checked out of school like in fourth grade. Right. I finished third grade, get into fourth grade, and I was just done. Like I didn't want anything to do with it. My brain just could not, I could not slow down and focus, one. And number two, I was a smart kid, so almost everything coming at me, it just felt irrelevant. It felt contextually not even connected to my life. I had all these ideas of what I wanted life to be, but I was just scattered. So this energy was going into 1,000 different things. So it's a long answer to your question, but yes, I painted, I drew, I carved stuff. I mean, I sculpted stuff. Any and everything I could do with artistic things, I was always doing those sort of things. Um, but I didn't. I had no one back then to say to me like, "Hey, you should consider a career in this direction or that direction." Almost all of it was me just being bullheaded and stubborn and just doing what I wanted to do, essentially.
So when you're a part of this, or like, I guess I put the cart before the horse there. Is there a big group of people that do what you do, how you do it, or are you kind of a lone wolf in that? Like as far as the artistry and that type of stuff. Like, are you an island in this way, or are you part of? Do you have some people you collaborate with, and or people that you text and bounce ideas off of?
Yeah, so tile is an ancient trade, right? we see all the time, like on Facebook, these they discover these ancient mosaics.
Mm,
This mosaic is 2,000 years old, buried under a sea, and they just find it, right? And if you look at all of those ancient mosaics, they're all it's art, right? It's pure art. These are not just thought of as floor coverings. Or you look at something like the Sistine Chapel.
hmm.
Um, Floors and ceilings used to be not entirely, but very often they were canvases, and the greatest craftsmen and artists in the world worked on them. You think about, the Sistine Chapel, for instance, and Michelangelo, and that's a ceiling to a building, right? So he's in the trades, if you will, but he's an artist. Um, so there's always been a strand of people in construction that are creative types, that are artistic. And there still are. Now, it's hard for me to, so the eye can never see the eye, right? Like your eyes can't see your eyes. You only see into the world.
Yeah.
These are externally facing sensory, like, perception tools that we have. And so what I'm saying is each person has a really hard time, at least I do, and I imagine it's this way for everyone. We have a hard time seeing our own context,
Hmm.
right? You can't really see yourself. It's hard. You can look at yourself in the mirror, but you're so familiar with what you're seeing that you don't really know what you're looking at. And I kind of
That's
feel that way
awesome.
a lot of times when it comes to the work that I do.
Yeah.
So much of it, I'm just doing what I want to do. And it's not till after the fact that people say this or that about it's this or it's that. It's just what I want to do, right? And it it started becoming more apparent to me, I would say 4 or 5 years ago, that like, oh, I do really good work, and like this really resonates with people. They really like to see this. And so I started to find more and more people that do focus more on the artistry side of things. And there's a group I'm a part of called the on Facebook called the Tile Artisans Trade Guild or something like that. It's just a couple thousand people. But I would say within that group, there's 50 or 100 people that are world class artisans. And through all of this, I've met some people that like my work. It's good, but I could put you on to some people whose work is just like world class. Like it's the best in the whole world. So I don't know. We do exist. Not a lot of us. I wish there were more.
Do you find that do you find that difficult to not maybe have some people to rely on? And I guess, like you're saying, everybody has their own artistic impression, and to maybe collaborate with other people who maybe don't necessarily understand your artistic ability or vision. I guess that can be. I guess it can be good and bad, right? Be nice to have some people to collaborate with, but at the same time, because your design and work is so much yours, is it kind of a struggle between wanting to maybe create and collaborate with people versus, like you're saying, I'm just seeing the work that I'm doing and that's a expression of me?
Well, I mean, there is no the struggle is real, put it that way. And the trope or the stereotype of like the struggling artist, it's a very real reality. And there is no way around that. That's required, right? For many artists, I think this statement will resonate. Being an artist is really it's a practice in discovering authenticity, discovering your own individuality, discovering who you are. And that is something that any person that goes down that path in life to discover, well, who am I really? Um, that's a long, arduous journey. That's a task that requires self-reflection, self-criticism, self-meditation, self-praise at times, even just to, make sure all things are well and in balance. And so uh, I don't know. It's difficult, but the difficulty of it, I've always just taken as like, this is just the toll, right? This is the cost of it. If I'm going to actually get to do the type of work that I want to do, it really just comes down to not my ability, but how much work am I going to put in, to allow that to happen. Or another way to look at it is, um, it's a two-way street because sometimes we grind and we work and we strive so hard, and you forget to just allow things to happen. You forget to get out of your own way, and you forget to take stock in where you are
Hmm.
and your how your abilities have come along. And so, I don't know. To answer your question, I would say there are difficulties involved, but if you've gone through those difficulties, they're not things you would undo because then after you go through them, you've discovered essentially another thing about yourself. And in discovering that thing about yourself, we're all just one race, really. So you're discovering truths about humanity in general. I think everyone is looking out, right? Everyone wants to look outside of themselves for the answers to what it is they seek or what it is they're trying to do. So they're always looking to a teacher or a guide or a coach or someone to give them the
Self-help
answer.
book, or yeah.
Yeah, self-help book, but it's like, if you would just go down the really arduous path of knowing yourself, you don't need any of those things, right? All the answers that a person needs to figure out their path in life, those answers are inside of themselves. The reason people don't look inward in the way that they should is because a lot of times it's really ugly inside of there, and it's too painful to start there. And so we want to skip ahead and we
Hmm.
we look outside for help from somebody else. Um, so I don't know. I can't remember exactly what your question was, but the struggle is real. Uh, but that's required of it. I
Hmm.
mean, you have to figure out, how do I get my work in front of the right eyeballs, and
Yeah.
how do I resonate with the right people so that they want what I offer.
Speaking of that, the work that you're doing, if someone asks you to do a crazy intricate mosaic, that's something outside of your comfort zone, let's say, how do you deal with that? Right? Like, how do you, whether
Um,
it's research or and what's that process like? Do you sit down and draw it first, or meditate on it and then draw it, or like what's that whole process like?
so honestly, I am recklessly like optimistic, right? There's not many things that I look at and think like I couldn't do that. I have that problem where basically everything that I look at, I think, oh, I could do that. And it may or may not turn out horrible, but if I set my mind to trying it, like I'm gonna give it a real hearty attempt. Um, and so I don't know, I am a very visual person. I would say because of those who listen to this who also are like ADHD like me, like I'm hardcore ADHD, like
Mm,
that hyperactive and the focus side of things, like I can zone in on something and just go to town for 6 and 8 and 10 hours straight
yeah.
and just not pull out for air,
Hyper
right? And
focus.
so
Yeah. I've been
hyper-focused.
diagnosed with ADHD as well. So I'm
Yeah, so you
you're
understand
preaching to
it.
the choir.
Yeah. And so I don't know, it's a label, but I feel like it is a label that if people, it's all on a spectrum, right? So I think the label sometimes is helpful for people to like realize like, oh, we're speaking the same language, or oh, I do understand the impulse that you're talking about, or I do understand the urge or the drive or the thing that it is you're talking about. But I definitely have that aspect of it. Like if I latch onto something and want to do it, I'll just sit there for hours, and that's I was probably chronically dehydrated until I was 30 years old and realized like, wow, I have a lot of very bad habits just because like this ADHD thing. Like I
Hmm.
don't take care of a lot of like just basic things that people probably should take care of.
Oh, you
So
just
like
don't think about it.
you just
Right?
don't, yeah, I don't think about
Like
it.
when you're
Like
in
not at
that
all.
zone, when you get in that hyper focus zone, nothing can tear you away from that. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
and not only that, like a lot of times you're just not even aware. Like certain things are just not even on your radar that that's how you behave.
Yeah.
And it's become such a painful, I shouldn't say painful. It has been just a very a labor to really zoom out and try and understand like just relative to what a generally thought of normal life looks like. Where am I on that barometer, on that scale? And so some stuff, I just had it in my head that like, oh, that's just the way I am. And it's like, no, you probably should stay hydrated. You probably
Yeah,
should
yeah, yeah.
try and practice good hygiene. You probably should get your sugar addictions under control and all these things. You probably should try and live by a schedule and add some structure to your life. And I lived basically just as like until I was 30, just like a wandering gypsy, just doing whatever I wanted, but I had so much energy and just like force that I could just like just brute force my way through anything. And that coupled with probably just the natural artistic ability or whatever. We're all born different. I was just born with a really hyper brain, but also I'm not a dummy, right? I don't. It's hard to talk about these things without sounding like you're just praising yourself, right?
Hmm.
But I'm not a dummy. I've always been a pretty intellectual, kind of smart person. I'm very introspective. That in combination with ADHD is like when you're dopaminergically deficient, what that basically means is pretty much your body never quite feels as comfortable as it should. And so I always have been fidgety and a little uncomfortable in my skin, but a know-it-all, right?
Hmm.
For lack of a better term, just too proud and too much ego to recognize like you do have talent and you do have intellect, but you got this other thing going on in your brain that these two in combination with each other, if you can't hone some of this in through the freedom that is discipline, it's not going good places. So, what was
We were
the
talking about like the whole process of
yeah,
so
yeah,
if someone asks you for this big, complicated, intricate thing, I'm
yeah.
assuming you get into like a hyper focus mode, and what do you do from there?
Phone call command, press ignore. Yeah, I'll focus in on it. I like to consume, I'm visual, so I like to see images, I like to see videos, I like to look at what other people have done, maybe to get some of those creative juices flowing. I think we are all a conglomeration of a million influences, a billion influences that we've all had in our lives. So while I would like to sit back and think like, oh, this is original, this is real creativity coming out, that's a very vain way of looking at things because how this process goes for me is I look at pictures, I look at how other people are doing things and just consume. I'd say I've probably seen over a million tile photos in my life because I'm just every day looking at who's doing what, how are they doing it, what are their techniques. And so now when I go to do something creative, I don't think I could actually ever say like, oh, I came up with this.
Hmm.
I might be the one that manifests it, but we are all such conglomerations of so many variables of input that, just whatever comes out comes out.
Yeah,
Where it comes from, I don't know exactly how that works.
it's all been done before, right?
You're
Yeah,
just
there's
you're
no
just
new thing under the sun.
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
just creating. You're taking all that in and creating it to suit you and your vision of what you want it to look like.
Yeah, pretty much. And I've learned to when I'm creating something, this is a very Zen thing or a very kind of Buddhist way of looking at it, but this idea of being the observer, right? I've learned with so many things that there's a part of us that is this chattering voice inside of our head, and it's telling us how to do things. That voice is not the thing doing whatever it is you're doing, right? It's just not. That voice is leading you to believe, oh, do this, do that. the more that voice is chattering, especially when it comes to creative things for me, the crappier the thing is going to be that I want to produce. So yeah, we're all just you're producing something, but it's really not, for me, the things that I do and the artistic stuff I do, it's not really coming from a conscious side of my mind where I'm thinking, oh, I need to do this precisely like this. I really try and just feel my way through it, right? There's a lot of stepping back and looking at the thing I'm working on. And almost continuously, I step back and look at it because I'm trying to just feel it. I'm trying to
Hmm.
take in the context of it. I'm trying to interact with it and see what's the exchange like. How is this thing speaking to me or not speaking to me? And then tweak it from there. Um, but really, the more that I try and precisely conceptualize what it is I'm trying to do, it just doesn't go so well. The best things that I've ever done have really come out of just letting creativity flow without that internal voice criticizing every step of the process or deceiving you into thinking that you're some creative thing that you're not. Because, we don't, I don't even know how I brush my teeth in the morning, let alone like make a tile mosaic, right? These are just things that I do, right? It's like you could
Mhm.
talk to a bunch of ants and ask them how they make an ant farm. Like they're not going to tell you how. It's just what they
Yeah.
do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I've come to really embrace that when it comes to the creative side of things. It's just what I do. And I love that. And it's also let me off the hook too in terms of when it comes to talking about this stuff like we're talking right now. I don't have any ego or pride there. I'm quick to say I don't know. My wife hates this, but I tell her all the time, I just do it.
Yeah.
And that's really the truth about so many things. It's just like I don't know. I just do it.
Hmm. Yeah, I think humility, I've heard it said humility is not denying who you are. Humility is accepting who you are and how you've been, like how you've been created or whatever your purpose is. It's not being like, oh, no, no, no. When someone compliments you, it's like, oh, yeah, thank you. Like accepting that, accepting your skills and your talents and who you are that way.
Yeah, because I really agree with that. It's a counterintuitive thing, right?
Hmm.
Because how do I want to word that exactly? So I was a pastor for 10 years, and I'm not going to make this a religious
Hmm.
conversation. I don't pastor now, but I always think of a guy like Moses in the Bible. Now, we're not going to get into the history of the Bible and who wrote what, but there's a passage in I think it's Numbers where it says that Moses was the meekest man on the planet, basically something like that.
Yeah, the most humble
And
man
maybe,
on the planet. Yeah,
yeah, so maybe you've heard this anecdote before. You
yeah.
got to step back and ask yourself, like, who was it that wrote that? Right? It
It's
was Moses.
Moses.
He wrote, yeah, yeah. And so when it comes to letting
So funny.
your gifts shine, and just figuring out what it is you're supposed to be doing here, a huge dose of humility is required because number one, we are so um, we are so proud to think that everyone in life can just figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you got to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. It's like, well, I don't know that that's what life is really all about because life from day to day is just it's just life, right? You're just living. We're human beings, right? And so you think about existence itself. I have to go back to the Bible again, like I said, because I have this theological background. But you the great I am. What a statement, right? That's existence itself.
Hmm.
That's being itself. It's just what is. And I am that. And so are you. So is we are all that. You think about the experience of I. The experience of I for me is the same as the experience of I for you. And it's not a different experience fundamentally. There's only one I. Now there's 7 point whatever billion people on the planet, but they're all I, which is really a confounding thought when you try and break that down. You realize like we are all living. as single subjects with one point of view in the world. We are all living the same exact existence. There's no, like, there are differences in the technical aspects of it, but I am I. And I can say of you that you are you, like you're just a separate subject from me, but that's not your experience. Your experience is the same as my experience. I'm just I. And so when it comes to like figuring so much out in life, we put so much pressure on this linear, this chronological path forward, like like there's steps to it, like there's some sort of logical roadmap to life. It's like it doesn't matter if you take it from a religious or a secular perspective, the whole thing is wild, and the
Yeah.
whole thing is just outlined with mystery, right?
And
The
that's
past,
okay. And that's okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's not only is it okay, it's like when you come into that present knowledge, it's like that's where real creativity is, because that's when you let go of all the the historical constraints of the mind, and also all this forward looking anxiety that we all have, right?
Hmm.
We're all squeezing our fists and leaning into the future with this forwardly skewed pressure, right? And anxiety toward what lies ahead. And what really is the future? When we really examine it, it's like anytime you think you're in the future, you're just now, right? You're not there, you're just here. And that's the only place you ever are, is just here. And so, uh, well, anyways, tangents on tangents.
That's
This is,
okay.
No, it's
yeah,
important to think about because if you're not present in this moment, you're not even in your work. If you're worried about the next job or what's next while you're doing this one, it's not going to yield a great product at the end, right? You need to be present in this moment. I think it's a good thing for a lot of people to consider.
yeah. The future and the past are the biggest, zaps, if you will, of your focus and your attention.
Hmm.
And if you've ever written anything or ever painted or drawn, or even like you're just golf. I love golf, right? Um, there, there's so many examples of this. What is called by the entrepreneurs the flow state, right? But that's not something that the entrepreneurs came up. That's a very ancient idea, right? And it's this idea of bringing all of your capacity, be it mental or physical, into the present moment so that your focus can be on the razor's edge of reality, which is right now, right? And it's like if you're too busy thinking about like what's next, that's energy, right? That's mental energy going into something else, diverting it away from what's going on right now. I'm not saying there's no place for wisdom and foresight and planning, but those things have to be done in deliberate and focused ways. Because if your brain is just always scattered in Fantasyland, by definition, you could say is the future, because it's all dream. You don't know what it is.
Hmm.
None of us really know what it is. It's complete mystery to us. And so if you're just caught up with what is next, what is the next step, to the point where you're anxious and scared and fearful and tense, and even aggravated, impatient, all those sort of things. Uh, if those are the character traits that you're showing in your life or the symptoms of your life, then way too much of your psychic or mental energy is just going other places that are not allowing you to just be here right now. And that's really how you show up for people in the best way, is just being with them as uh, focused as you can in that moment.
Hmm.
So
That's awesome.
you mentioned looking at photos. You said you mentioned a million photos of tile work, looking for inspiration, technique, and stuff. And I'd like to touch a little bit on the technique side, because you have you're scribing larger format tiles into the smaller mosaic one. Like, you have a ton of technique that you show through your Instagram page. And has that taken a long time to develop? And are you continually developing that? I feel like some of this stuff takes a long time and persistence, being focused in the moment. Can you talk a little bit about how your techniques have developed since you started, 17, even longer, 17 years ago, and where you're at now, and maybe some goals, or where you see, is there new techniques you'd like to try or better yourself at?
Yeah, so um, I am ambidextrous. I had a lot of that when I was little. So because of that, a lot of tools I've been able to use with both hands. So over the years, like a grinder, for instance, when I'm scribing, that grinder it's an extension of both my right and my left hand, right? So I don't want to get too technical, but basically there's 8 variations of how you can use a grinder. You can push or pull the grinder towards you or away from you with your right or your left hand. So there's 4, but you can also orient the blade so that's spinning toward you or away from you. So there's 8 variations on how you can use that 4-inch grinder. I'm at the point where I can use a grinder in any one of those 8 variations very, very proficiently and cleanly. I said that to say this: if you're using you've probably used a grinder in the past doing tile work. Most guys, they got one way they go about it. They use the tool in one way. And so I don't know exactly why. Even when I first started working with these tools, I really just I wanted to know them very, very intimately. I wanted to be able to work with them as extensions of my hands. And so the scribing and even like mitering, I just put out a YouTube video on how to make tile miters. I say at the beginning of the video, like, this is an advanced technique. So, I'll tell you what I know and you can give it a shot. But man, oh man, it, you can watch me do it and you might think like, oh, that looks easy. But like making tile miters is one of the most complicated things you can do in tile work. Like you don't see it. It maybe 1 out of 100 showers or maybe 1 out of 200 showers that you look at will have miters in. And I try and add them on a regular basis to my projects. And so that's technique, right? That's craftsmanship. That's a skill that's taken me really years and years to get proficient at. And so if you're just starting out, like, I don't, I guess my advice is like what I did was I just wanted to try anything and everything. If I saw someone else doing it, like I wanted to try that. And so I've always just pushed myself into techniques and doing certain types of work that, excuse me, were just out of my comfort zone, just to always be getting better. And so yeah, I'm always looking for new techniques. I got probably 3 different techniques on my radar right now that I would like to try. I would say probably once every month and a half or so, I'm experimenting with something new to me. Um, Over the years, I mean, there's very few things that I haven't tried, or I mean, you could bring up almost anything to do with tile work, and I could talk at length about that subject. Um, and that's really what mastery is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did the math once on how long I've tiled, and that the old thing with like 10,000 hours of practice to make an expert, with the caveat of deliberate practice. Well, I've been a very deliberate installer from day one, and I've done the math, and I have something like 35,000 hours in at this point. Like it's so much,
Wow.
it's crazy.
And you're
And so
35, and you're only 35.
yeah, I mean it's
That's
crazy. It feels like
incredible.
multiple. It feels like multiple lifetimes,
Yeah,
honestly.
I would.
I,
Yeah.
so I have to say though, like ADHD has been a real I have I'm to the point in my life now where I have a lot of idiosyncrasies. I'm quirky, I'm strange in so many ways. My marriage has been uh I would consider my marriage probably the most fulfilling project I've ever worked on, if my wife would appreciate me calling it a project. Um but it has been a labor of love for my wife to just live with me,
Yeah.
right? Because I am a really idiosyncratic and strange person. Like, really, you might not think it on the outside, but to live with me, you would definitely see very quickly, like, oh, this guy's a little bit different. Um, I don't know what to attribute that to other than like something in the dopamine pathways in my brain is a little bit off, and so I'm always just I feel like I'm always reaching out and seeking. Um, I don't want to. It's not like an urge or a drive that is I don't think makes me compulsive, but I just have this curiosity that like cannot be satiated. Like no matter what I do, the curiosity cannot be satiated. And so it's really driven me to become an expert in like a whole lot of things just by the fact that like when I get into something, people say like oh I read a book or two on that subject. Like if I go down a rabbit hole, it's nothing for me to binge like 50 books on a topic, right?
Wow. Holy.
I'm a I'm a binge whatever it is that I do.
Yeah.
And I know there are other people out there like me that just don't stop. But we're compulsive, I guess. We're neurotic. We're difficult. We can be very difficult to be around. But the beauty of life is if you're fortunate enough to keep living and to do that long enough, um, with the right motives, you can figure some of that stuff out
Hmm.
and get to the point where those voices inside of you that are harsh and that are critical and ugly towards yourself, they mellow out a little bit,
Hmm.
right? And you can learn to live with yourself in a way that's a little more harmonious and pleasant for the people around you.
In my experience, it's been very freeing to even just understand how my brain works. And then my loved ones around me understand why I do the things I do. And then it's like, okay, well, this is just how it is then. It's just how my brain works. But switching gears a little bit, I was just curious I mean, hearing about your experience, like with, what am I trying, how do I say this? Just thinking about your experiences and all the, you're talking about like the billionaires' houses, and you're talking about, that project for Kanye West's house, and what's the coolest, and I mean, cool can mean whatever you want it to mean in this context, but what's the coolest project that you've ever been a part of that you're like, okay, this is awesome. Like I've made it, or like this is awesome.
So I'll say first of all that the I've made it thing is a it's illusory for me
Hmm.
because that, like I said, I'm so compulsive and neurotic in that curiosity
Yeah.
that
You're never going to
I
make it.
really, yeah, I don't know that there's anything that will really satisfy that aspect of me. Now, I don't want that to sound negative because that type of drive can be a source of major anxiety for people. Um, I'm also a very contented and very like happy person. And those two things don't often go hand in hand. A lot of times when people are very driven, they can be very ugly people, just they're not even recognizing the ways in which they become ugly through their drive, right? Their drive can lead them to really run over relationships in ugly
Absolutely.
ways. Um, but if I, so the one I did recently with the mountain in the shower, that one I think was probably the most satisfying project to date. I did one a couple years ago with this big, uh, let's see, it was like 6 foot by 9 foot, like art panel. It was made in Italy. It's by a guy named Alex Turco, and it was like a $8,000 or $9,000 piece of art that I essentially installed in a shower. So
Wow.
yeah, um, it was like the whole back wall is like this. Uh, I don't know how to. It's like water drops, basically, like this big blue wall with water drops on it. I mean, it's kind of gaudy. It's a little bit gaudy, but it was really cool. That one was cool because 2 years previously, maybe 3 years previously, this guy Alex Turco came on my radar, and I had said to my wife like long before that project, like it would be a dream come true if I got to do one of those panels someday. And someone reached out to me out of the blue and was like, "Hey, I got this tile project with this piece of art. Are you interested?" And it was like I was over the moon because that felt like that was really one of the first instances where I saw this principle of like, you know what you see in the world and what you perceive in the world is what the world will be for you,
Mm.
right? This whole thing of like manifesting it and all that, people use that, those buzzwords. And I don't like using all of that language because most people just use that to sell a book or to sell a program or sell
Yeah.
you something, right?
Yeah.
But I am a firm believer, like I like Carl Jung and I like what he says
Mhm.
about the subconscious and the your ego and the way that we have a persona and we have a shadow and we have a this thing in us that's always projecting out onto the world.
So the ego, the id, and I forget the other one.
The
Anyways.
superego, that's
Yeah,
the
super ego.
Freudian idea.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes, so that's the Freudian idea. Then Jung takes it a little bit farther and kind of like the term persona. That's a Jungian term. He came up with that.
Mm.
And the persona is the face that we all put on forward, outward facing for the world to see. That's our persona. And with many people, that's very much at odds with what the internal life is. They're two different worlds. And so the idea is to bring these worlds into harmony so that you are not internally like schismatic or divergent person, right? You don't develop psychosis over time. So you're harmonious. And so that principle of harmony, though, is where Jung also talks about synchronicities, right? And synchronicities is an idea that I love. I love the idea that everything that we interact with in the world is something that to an extent is harmonizing with us. So your environment is your environment, the way that you perceive it, like you're perceiving it in that way because it's harmonizing with you, right? There's something fitting there that it's I feel like I'm being very confusing right now.
No, I think I
What
understand
you
what you're saying. Like it's not apart from you. It's harmonious. Like
It is you. Like
yeah.
you are your environment, right? So you have internally, you have your conscious and you have your subconscious. But then there's this external world that our persona faces. And the external world also has a conscious and subconscious, right? The external world is the world of perceived reality. We look at it and we think, okay, this is the world. This is the way that it is. But the subconscious of the external world it's like the inverse of you. It's like you fit in this world in a way that is patterned and harmonious. They're not disconnected. They're one thing. And so it's like this. I like to magnify instances of kindness in other people. If I experience someone else being kind to me, I want my scale, my internal barometer of what kindness is, to be very, very sensitive. And the reason is because the more sensitive you make your scale to kindness, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy so that now I'm going to experience more kindness, right? I'm going to experience more of it because I'm perceiving it more. I'm deliberately perceiving it more. That's kind of how this idea of manifesting works. You really have to do the internal work inside of your mind and in your heart and your soul, your spirit, whatever term you want to use. You have to do the work so that you can see in the world the beauty, right? You can see the harmony. And however that takes place, when you put that out into the world, this is so this is so woo woo,
Oh,
right?
it's
But
philosophical, but we all connect to it because we're humans, right?
yeah, yeah, and we're all energetic people, right? That's all that we fundamentally are is energy. There's just little balls of energy, and the smaller we examine things, the more we recognize like there is no solid state to reality. It's all fluid. It's all movement. It's all motion. And with that being said, when you start to understand, like, okay, how do I go with that flow? How do I harmonize with the movements of nature and the movements of life? Or how do I harmonize it? Like, for instance, if I want more beauty in my life, like how do I harmonize with beauty so that I'm attuned to it, so that I flow with it, so that I can see it and so that I can understand it? We think you just got to go out and force your way and like a bull in a china shop, make things happen. And it's like, no, things will happen if you're living in the right type of harmonious way. Because look at the world around you. Like the world around you is a patterned and harmonious place of just indescribable beauty.
Mhm.
And it is just that by its state, right? The mountains aren't out there forcing things to happen. They just are what they are. And that's kind of how I look at these sort of things. Like, um, I'm just really deliberate and conscious to work on myself first
Mhm.
when it comes to what I'm trying to get out of life, because that's where everything starts with each and every one of us, really.
So you're talking about being very energy and focused. You've been doing this tile installation for 17 years. How has that been on your body physically? Because I did that for probably 4 or 5 years going through university, and I felt it very strenuous. Doing tile floors, and I wasn't even doing tile full time. It was just kind of jobs in between. But I felt it very not debilitating, but it's a very physical job. Has how is your body from doing tiling for as long as you have? Like, are you starting as you get a little bit older? Are you starting to, feel, get a bit sore, or is it starting to um, slow you down a little bit? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so tile is a very demanding trade, right? It's the nastiest of the finished trades. It's every bit as nasty as like being a stonemason, but you're working inside though. And so it's really a difficult spot to be for many people. Um, I hate to get philosophical again, but I have to explain this. If you if you have not learned how to move through life in a graceful way, the trades will beat you up, right? And that's what we see in the trades. We see crotchety, old, just beat up people, just sore, bad backs and bad knees and bad necks and all of that. At that point in life, I mean, it just is what it is. But usually, what precedes that, though, is just the decades and decades of stubbornness, right? Of just muscle your way through it, just grit your teeth and get it done, right? I remember when I was little, not li little, um, when I was younger doing tile work, we used to have competitions, like who can carry more bags of thin set, right?
Yeah.
And that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And or like carry 4 5-gallon buckets of water with 2 hands, crazy stuff like that, just to see who could push themselves harder. That's all fine when you're young, but as you age, you definitely have to discover. And I say this all with a grain of salt because I'm only 34, right? So I can't speak as a very old man, but I can speak as someone who's been doing it for a pretty long time at this point. I've had to swallow my pride, and I'm not a recovering like alcoholic, but I liken like the 12-step program, that first step is something along the lines of like just recognizing your helplessness,
Mhm.
right? The first step is the ugliest step because that's the one where you have to be the absolute like most truthful version of yourself you can, right? You have to be true with reality. And when it comes to construction, there's so much bullheadedness and stubbornness and right, just got to get it done. We got a schedule. We need more efficiency. Just like blast your way through it. That there's really not a lot of room in people's lives for grace and for patience. And without those elements, number one, you can't be a real expert craftsman. But number two, that's where you're going to get yourself in trouble physically because, the fact of the matter is as much as I would love to just be able to tile for 500 years, um, the aspect of us, each of us, in reality, generally speaking, that takes the most abuse is our bodies. Some people, as they age, it's their mind. They have issues with the mind and, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and dementia, that sort of thing. But for most people, the body gives out. And in construction, especially, it's wise to know that, look, the part of you that's going to give up quickest or say uncle quickest is the part of you that's actually doing the work, right? I'm not like levitating tile with my mind as much as I wish I could. It's my hands, it's my arms, it's my back that is doing that work. And so I do get sore, I do get tired. But I've just learned to adopt. I have a whole wellness regiment that I stick to religiously on a daily basis, and I never miss certain. So I would say there's four. I would say four pillars really to me staying well in the body that I live by on a daily basis. That I have found I'm not slowing down actually. I'm getting better as I age on the physical side of things. One, because I have ADHD, like my food habits growing up were the worst. So bad, like just terrible. And I didn't wake up to a lot of that stuff till I was like 27, 28 years old. And so now, the past 5, 6, 7 years, I've actually been getting better and better on the physical front because I've realized, like, oh, all these terrible habits you've had for all these years, like they are majorly holding you back. And if you hold on to them, not only are they going to hold you back, in time they'll destroy your body.
Hmm.
And so there's certain things that I'm very deliberate about every single day, really to be kind to my body. I feel bad for this meat bag that I'm in because I don't treat it as kindly as I should. Now I'm getting better about that, much much better. I would say I'm a different person entirely than if had you run into me 10 years ago, say. But yeah, it's tough, and you have to be disciplined if you want to stay in it for a while.
Would you care to share those four pillars? Is that
Um, yeah, I'll just so one is diet,
Mhm.
right? Diet. And it's going to be stereotypical, the things that I say, but they are really true. Um, sugar and processed foods, like for me, when my diet's out of whack, I can it's almost like clockwork now where I can kind of predict where my mentality, where my mind, where my body is going to be uh once the diet starts to take certain turns that I know it shouldn't. It's like clockwork. I know certain things are going to happen um that are not good. So my diet is it's this like I said, I don't have to go into all that. It's the stereotypical stuff, right? Eat healthy. I eat as healthy as I can, which for me has been, I said that one first because that's been the battle of my life,
Mhm.
right? The compulsive side of me is so compulsive, right? The sugar thing, man, oh man, like candy bars, ice cream, pizza, cheesecake, you name it. Like I grew up with my brother and my dad. So we didn't do home cooked meals. We did like Hungry Man frozen dinners
Yes,
and
the
I,
Swansons. I have a very similar upbringing to you, is what you're talking. I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally me.
yeah. Yeah, so the thing of like, man, eat your vegetables and all
Hungry
that, I
man.
didn't have any of that growing up. Um, I'm discovering it now, not now. You know, I would say actually probably since I was 25 or 26, me and my wife both really started to become very deliberate about our diet. So diet is one. Two is I meditate, and I do that every night. I meditate for anywhere from 15 to like 45 minutes, and that meditation is different forms. There's different types of meditation you can do. There's different exercises and all that, but I never miss that. I never miss that because your mind your mind is always experiencing the world through your five senses, right? Those five senses are just that's data input, right? So you have all this data that's coming into your mind all day long. It never stops. what meditation does, at least for me, is it just gives my mind a chance to create a little bit of space between all all the what's the word I'm looking for? All
Noise.
the elements of life. Yeah, all the noise.
Yeah.
All the noise. The noise never stops if you're not very, very deliberate to cut out all the noise, which I do through meditation. Like you got to think, not only is your body taking a beating, a lot of people's mental health goes down over the years because you just wear yourself out, right? It's not that your mind is not capable, it's that you've not recognized, you've never given it a break. You've just never learned how to actually control your mind. And I don't mean control in like a forced way, but just how to actually live with your mind harmoniously. Meditation is something that I found has allowed me to just stop the noise and create space for nothing. And people always talk to me when I bring up meditation, they want to know, like, well, what do you meditate about? Or how do you this and that? And it's like, well, there is no point to meditation other than nothing. Meaning, like, when you meditate, the idea is to stop the chatter, to cease the just be the observer and don't sit there and just think, right? People meditate and they what I got to think about when I'm meditating. That's not what meditation is, right? Meditation is just an opportunity to create space so that your brain can chill, right? It's like running a hot rod or whatever. Like you're just going to run it nonstop. You got to turn the thing off eventually,
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's
or it's
like
just going to burn
taming.
out.
Is it but the Buddhist mental or tradition of like taming the monkey mind? You know, that's like
Yeah.
all over the place. Just like calm, just chill out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to, the internal chatter, um, internal chatter doesn't stop, right? And so that's like that. There's two aspects of this. One is we say like if you want to focus, go external. It means go out of your mind and cast your senses on whatever it is that you're doing. So you go external. That's going out of your mind. But then in meditation, you're going into your mind, but you're going into your mind so that you can just let it calm itself, right? Um, I heard this once about like a troubled waters, like on a pond, right? If waters are choppy, like you don't take a rake and like try and smooth the waters. And that's what so many of us do through activity. We think like, man, my mind is just so busy and it's so choppy. And we think that through more busyness and more activity, like we can fix that problem. But you can't. Like your brain needs, your mind needs space for nothing. It just needs that. It's to take it back to the Buddhist thing. The Buddha talked about this idea of the point between an inhalation and an exhalation, right? So you breathe in and then you breathe out, and there's a spot in there where it's neither, right? It's neither inhalation nor exhalation. It's somehow in between, and it's just a small point where nothing is happening. And that's what meditation is. A person has to be able to give themselves an opportunity, a small break for just nothing to happen. And so there's that aspect of it. The third thing is um, is ice showers, and I know that's the trend, and everyone sees it. It's all over social media. Like
Wilm
I
Hof,
hate to be, yeah, Wim Hof, right?
Wim
I
Hof.
hate to be the guy that's just like, oh, I jumped on this trend. Like I started doing this maybe like 6, 8 months ago, something like that. Before that, I'd been doing the Wim Hof breathing, right? I've been doing Wim Hof breathing for like going on 2.5 years now,
Mm.
something like that. I recommend that to anyone and everyone. Like if you don't do Wim Hof breathing or haven't tried it, I highly recommend it, especially if you're someone like me whose brain just goes 1,000 miles an hour. Like try the Wim Hof breathing. Um, but more recently, I've taken up the ice showers, which has just taken all the above to the next level. Like it's really taken everything to the next level. In terms of like you just feel good. Like it helps you just feel good in your body, your mind. You notice yourself becoming less reactive, less impatient. Um, I don't have the competitive urges and drives to, one-upsmanship and all that. It all just kind of fades away when you take up some of these practices. How exactly that happens, I don't know. I think it's, when I don't know how off the rails this podcast goes typically, but I can take you way off the rails here if you'd like. Um, in like psychedelic culture, right? People talk about psychedelics and those sort of things. You always hear this idea of consciousness expansion being thrown out. Like your mind is being expanded, your awareness is being expanded. I never really knew what that meant. You hear people talk about it, but I think perhaps it's like this. Through meditation, somehow you're just becoming more aware of your environment, both internally and externally. And somehow through these practices, like you just become more empathetic through awareness. You get more in touch with your feelings. And so when you see somebody else going through something, like you know what it feels like, right? Or you have something in your mind you can draw on where you can say like, oh, I know what they're going through because I felt that. I felt exactly what it is that they're going through. Meditation is the thing which teaches us what that is without having to go through it,
Hmm.
right? When I meditate, there are times when you find yourself in certain states and you have realizations where you're like, oh, that's what that's like, or that's what that person specifically is experiencing, right? And so, like psychedelics, to say, like, oh, you take some psychedelics and you get this consciousness expansion. I've never taken a hero's dose of mushrooms or anything like that. I'm not, I'm not necessarily against it if that's
Hmm.
where your path takes you or whatever. But the point that I'm making is through meditation, you over time you just kind of feel like your consciousness expands, and through that process, you just lose certain urges and drives. Like you don't necessarily want to argue, you don't want to fight, you don't want to
Yeah.
compete, you don't want to outdo people. You're more interested in collaborating and harmonizing with people or praising people than you are, you know, I guess it'd be this difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Hmm.
Um, that's all, those are all mental constructs until you take up some of these wellness practices. And when you do, you just kind of, you run into them headlong and you have these experiences where it's like, oh, I thought I knew what that meant, but now I've had the experience of this or that. Um, so what is that? So
That's
there's
three.
diet, yeah, diet, breathing exercises,
Showers.
the ice showers I take, and ice baths.
Yeah.
I love them. I'm in love. That's the newest one that I've added to my kind of regiment overall, because they are just, if you haven't tried it, it's crazy. It's just crazy is all that I'll say. Um, and what was the fourth thing? What do I do every single day? Now it's leaving my mind here. Um, I shower, I eat healthy, I breathe and meditate every night, and um, just stretching. I stretch every night too. I do some, my wife does yoga. I don't really do a lot of yoga, but I do stretch a lot. Um, all of these things in combination with one another is really what I found is the ticket.
Hmm.
Because like even with stretching, I didn't know how to stretch until I knew how to relax.
Mm.
And I didn't know how to relax until I understood what tension in the body was. And I didn't understand what tension in the body was until I sat down and tried to meditate, right? And before that, I didn't really want to know how to meditate until I decided like, oh, I need to cut some sugar out, right? And so all these things have had like a cascading dominoing effect where it's like I fixed one little thing and then it kind of opened my eyes to like, oh, maybe if I try this, now it will help.
Hmm.
And so there's so many things, there's so many tools out there for a person to be well and to be effective and to be impactful and to really bring everything that they have to the table of life, but they're not accessible in the improper order.
Hmm.
Like each of us has to go through our experience of life in this way that is authentic and real to yourself.
Yeah. So keeping in that same mindset or that frame of kind of advice, if you will, or life knowledge, what's some advice that you have for people who want to get started in the tile setting industry, if you want to call it that, or the trade?
So I would say, first of all, be honest about what your motives are. If you're a highly capable and intelligent person and you want to become a tile setter because you think it's going to make you rich, um, I'm not saying that it can't, but I haven't figured that out, right? It's provided for me, and that's fine for me. One of the most, I don't want to say painful, and perhaps I'm still in process. This is still ongoing, and maybe it's a lifelong battle. I don't know. The power and draw of money cannot be denied, right? I think that's why biblically it's, you can't serve God and mammon. You can't serve God and money. It doesn't necessarily say that the one, um, well, I don't want to get into all the theology of that. We'll just use that as an illustration to say they're both powerful aspects of reality that have the capacity to, um, one, God can be your God or money can be your God, right? Money
Mm-hmm.
somehow has this capacity, unlike almost any other thing that a human comes into contact with, to um it's, hmm, people worship it,
Mm-hmm.
right? People worship it and they celebrate it and they're religious about it. I don't want to sound like the guy who's just like telling you like, oh, money's evil, money's evil. I'm not saying that. I think money's great and for many, many, many reasons it's great and there's a lot you need to know about it. But if you know yourself and you know that your motive is to make a lot of money, my advice would be don't do tile work because it's a lowly trade. It's a craft. And you just look through the course of history, it's very much in line with the arts, right? When you're going to be a craftsman, you're going to live something akin to or similar to an artist's life. Now, I'm not saying that if you're going to be a contractor or you're going to be a business owner or you're going to be an entrepreneur, that that's the case, but that's not what I am. I
Mm-hmm.
don't claim to be any of those things. I'm just a tile artisan. I gave up all those other labels like a long time ago. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business person. Uh, I'm not any of those things. And I'm not saying those things are wrong. That's just not what I am. So first of all, I'd say the advice, if you want to get into tile, is understand what your motives are and be honest with yourself about those motives because you can really confuse yourself in life if you think something's going to be this or that. Like it it may not be that, nor have the capacity to be that because it's fundamentally of a different cloth, a different
Yeah.
nature, if you will. And I don't know, maybe we'll do this podcast again when I'm 70, right? I'm 34 now. Maybe by the time I'm 70, I'll tell you, hey man, the road to riches is through craftsmanship and
Yeah.
artistry. Um, in many ways it is, but that can't be your primary motive. I want to make a lot of money so that I can do what I want to do on the artistry side of things. Like it's the greatest when I'm on a job where they're just like time and material, just time and material, because then it's like it's a fair trade. You pay me for my time and and you've given me liberty and freedom to just be a craftsman. Now, if you want to go into it to build a business and have employees and all that, flooring's great. You get a flooring store because you get volume with carpet and all that stuff. Like you can make a lot of money through volume. Um, but if you're asking me advice to give, give that person advice who's interested in those things, don't take my advice there because I've not figured any of those things out. I figured out that I'm actually not good at making money, that for whatever reason, um, I'm too self-deprecating, right? I'm not the guy that's just out there demanding all this money for this and that. Like, I'm not going to be out there marketing myself to the whole world so that, pay me what I'm worth type stuff.
Hmm.
I like the feeling of going through life in a graceful way and receiving it as it comes to me. The most satisfactory things that I've ever experienced have been things that I've wanted to do that I didn't have to force my way into.
Hmm.
Those things came to me. And I don't know why. I think that's just kind of how I'm built. I enjoy doing things in that way. Now, let me backtrack though and give you something practical for someone young. If you're just young and you are compelled by the trades, um, I would say seek to become the best that you can, uh, not as soon as you can, but put that, use that as your North Star, right? The best that you can. Don't compare yourself with what other people are doing or what their capabilities are. Just figure out through honest assessment, like what am I capable of? Or what do I have the potential to be capable of?
Hmm.
And what are the next logical steps to get there? So many people are like, how do you get this and that job? It's like, look, you're worrying about the wrong things. You've not even done one job yet. You need to go down to Home Depot or Lowe's and just find something, anything. So many of the funnest things that I did early on were free for my clients because number one, I was a bad business person, but really the motive behind that was I just wanted to do it. And if they weren't willing to pay me, I didn't take no for an answer. I just did it.
Yep.
And so that's why I didn't make a lot of money. People didn't really pay me for all those things. But what it did do was it gave me experience, it gave me practice, and it gave me opportunity to put so many things in my portfolio that now I can charge for. And now I can charge a premium for stuff. And so don't be proud. It's like, look, if you can't get someone to pay you to put miters in a tile niche because you've never done it before, don't blame them or call them cheapskates. You just got to figure out a way to get it done. Take reduced pay, do whatever you have to do to get it done so that you can prove to your future clientele that you've got the chops, that you can do it.
Hmm.
You know, otherwise, that's what, salesy and markety and all these people are like giving you all these systems and stuff. All of that stuff to me has always felt like just a way to skip ahead of the queue. And it's like, well, no, you got to earn your stripes,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
can't go sell a $50,000 shower if you've not already sold 50 $5,000 showers,
Yeah.
right? It's just not the way it works. So yeah, that's a little bit of my advice there.
So, with doing the work and being a tile artisan, what are some specific skill sets that are important to develop getting into this area?
On the practical side of things, I would say organization, right? Keep your books well, your tax records, your receipts, your paper trails, all that stuff. Organization. Don't fall in love with every little software and gadget and thing that marketers tell you need. Like you don't need this, you don't like this software or this app or this program or this coach. Like you don't need any of that. You just need to be disciplined and have organization, keep a good paper trail, stay up on your taxes, understand how all that works. Um, but then when it comes to doing the actual jobs, a good wet saw,
Hmm.
right? Quality is king when it comes to tools. Get yourself a good wet saw, like a DeWalt 24,000. I've used that same saw for a decade and a half. Not, I've had three of them,
Hmm.
but it's my workhorse saw. I've not changed it up. There's 100 different amazing saws out there. I have used the same exact model for a decade and a half. The beauty of that is I know that saw more intimately than probably 499 out of 500 tile guys. I've just stuck with it.
Yeah.
And so I can do almost anything that I need to do, I can do with that wet saw. Um, so get a good wet saw, a good grinder, good blades, diamond blades, you need those. The most important thing though is just get out there and find your guinea pigs. And I hate to put it that way, but if you're just starting, don't think that you're something that you're not, because tile is a hard trade. You've got to put in the homework. You've got to understand the processes of waterproofing, uh, the chemistry of how thin set works, like a grout, the installation procedures. Like there's a lot to it. You've got to understand all of that, and you've got to understand your place in that wide world. If you're just starting, you can have all the head knowledge you want, but you've got to prove to the world and to yourself that you can do it. And don't let anyone tell you that that can't be an ugly process. It can be. It can be a very ugly process, and that's okay. The point is to go through that process. Find somebody out there dumb enough to let you do their tile work because you just have to get started, and it's going to be rough at first. And it's the way that it is, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for taking time today to share your experiences and your outlook, and definitely provided a paradigm shift for me on a number of topics. And you can tell you're an absolute expert in this field, and you're so generous with the knowledge that you've gained over the years. And we just want to say we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. It's been very enjoyable. It means a lot to me that you guys reached out because the most this is going to sound like counterintuitive, right? Because I put all this stuff out on there on social media. I didn't put any of that stuff out there on social media with any intention of building a following,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I have an Instagram that's at like 50,000 followers. Like that's nothing in the grand scheme of things. But for a tile guy, it's something. I didn't have any intention of that.
Mm-hmm.
I just put it out there. And so for me to have an opportunity to talk to guys like this on a like you guys on a podcast, it means the world to me because it proves, at least to me personally, my own personal thesis of like, you don't have to be your own evangelist in this proud, egotistical way. Like you don't have to. Just do your best and put your best foot forward and be genuine and be charitable with people and and just see what happens. And that's kind of where things are for me. So I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. This has been a really, really good episode and a lot of cool insights and like I said, like paradigm shift moments for me personally. I don't know about you, Hoff, but hopefully our listeners are inspired by this conversation to kind of change their way of thinking, but also get out and just try it. Like you said, you got to just do it. And like you said, find some guinea pigs to hopefully they're dumb enough to let you try your first time. But as we kind of wrap up here, where can people find you? And is there anything that you have going on that you'd like to promote?
So Instagram, Vision Stone and Tile. I've got a TikTok too, but I've been, I'm kind of not as enamored with that whole deal recently, but primarily Instagram or I'm on YouTube. I've been putting some more energy into that, and that's going pretty decent. As far as things I'd like to promote, no, not really. If you're a nice person, reach out. I'm always accessible. I'm always like messaging people, direct messages, chatting with people. I just like talking with people, especially interesting people who will let me drone on because I'm long-winded. So yeah, I encourage anyone, reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time. This has been really good, really type of a point of growth for me. I have a lot of things to take, especially the meditation piece. I'm gonna maybe dive into that a little bit more. Yeah, thanks again. Thanks to everyone for listening. We'll put all of Nathan's info and contact info or the like his Instagram and that type of stuff where you could find him in the show notes of this episode. Big thanks again to Nathan. Thank you for listening. And thanks, Hoff.
Thanks, Rosie.
And we'll see everyone in the next one.